In the remote farmlands of Uttar Pradesh, dusk brings a thick, suffocating fog that swallows the narrow pathways between the crops, effectively erasing this completely isolated village from the modern map the moment the sun goes down. The locals here lock their doors early, driven by the persistent terror of a localized entity they call the Chhalawa. According to the lore, this shapeshifter hunts by mimicking the exact voices and mannerisms of loved ones, calling out from the fields to lure people into the tark. Those who follow the voice are eventually found dead under highly specific conditions. Their bodies are completely drained of blood, looking as though their very life force has been systematically siphoned out. Enter Vivan, a modern investigative journalist. He arrives armed with skepticism, intent on proving that this deadly legend is a textbook case of rural mass hysteria and psychological delusion. Intellectual arrogance is about to collide with a folklore that functions with the cold efficiency of a predatory organism. Stopping at the village's only tea stall, Vivan encounters Subodh, a local elder. Subodh functions as the living record of the village's generational trauma, and he immediately urges the journalist to stay away from the fields at night. Subodh points to a physical casualty. Just a day prior, a young girl's corpse was pulled from those fields. Her eyes were frozen open in absolute terror, and her veins were entirely empty. Vivan treats the physical evidence as a byproduct of collective trauma, missing the immediate physical danger that the elders have been living with for decades. Undeterred by the warnings, Vivan drives his jeep to the absolute edge of the village. He steps out at an isolated, overgrown property, finding the main door padlocked shut and the area completely abandoned. Suddenly, his phone rings. It's Subodh, pulling on the village center in a panic, begging Vivan to return immediately. The voice Vivan thought he heard calling from the darkness moments earlier wasn't Subodh, and now something is standing right outside his jeep. When Vivan flashes his light toward the shadow, he doesn't see a ghost. He sees a grotesque, physically twisted mirror image of himself, complete with mimicking clothing and unnatural, bent fingers. Vivan's modern defense mechanisms kick in. He draws a revolver and fires a shot directly at the entity. The bullet passes straight through the shadow, entirely useless, leaving behind a chorus of piercing, overlapping laughter. Panic takes over. Vivan throws his jeep into reverse and churns through the mud of the narrow pathways, gripped by the horrifying sensation that the shadows in the fields are physically reaching out to drag him down. Logic and physical weaponry have failed. Vivan has moved from an objective investigator into a direct participant in a system he cannot yet control. Vivan barely makes it back to Subodh's heavily barricaded home. Safely locked inside with the village elders, the mechanical history of the threat is finally laid out for him. 50 years ago, the village systematically cut off a dark magic practitioner named Tantric Kapilinath. This total social boycott isolated him from every community node, leaving him to starve in the center of a growing red boundary. His death did not end the problem. With his dying breath, Kapilinath forged a curse that transformed his starvation into an immortal shadow entity. This mass survives by exclusively absorbing the pulsing energy of human fear. Because Vivan panicked in the dark, he fed the entity. The Chhalawa has now physically latched onto Vivan's own shadow, effectively marking him as the parasite's next permanent vessel. The Chhalawa is a parasitic curse activated and sustained entirely by human psychological weakness. The entity doesn't kill with claws or teeth. It uses your own terror as the weapon to drain you dry. To survive, Vivan must sever this parasitic connection before sunrise. The elders present a highly dangerous two-step solution that requires him to head straight back into the danger zone. Physically, Vivan has to return completely alone to the original Havan Kornt, an old fire pit deep in the fields that serves as the geographic epicenter of Kapilinath's black magic. Psychologically, the task is much harder. He must offer a drop of his own blood onto those cursed ashes without showing a single micro-expression of fear, no matter what the entity does to him. To survive, Vivan must force his mind to override the core human survival instinct, the visceral drive to be afraid when facing a predator. Under a pitch-black, moonless sky, Vivan forces himself to march back into the fields. Crying children and screaming voices echo through the crops, but he clamps his hands over his ears, actively rejecting the auditory hallucinations designed to break his resolve. He reaches the blackened earth of the Havenkund. The moment he steps close, the air pressure drops, and the massive, distorted shadow of Kapalinath violently rises from the smoldering ashes to claim its vessel. As the entity inches closer, Vivan feels an intense physical pull. His own shadow begins writhing on the ground, and he experiences the suffocating sensation of his soul being slowly dragged out of his physical body. Remembering the Elder's warning, Vivan channels every ounce of willpower he has left. He drives an iron trident into his own hand, bleeding onto his palm, and slams it directly onto the cursed ashes, screaming at the shadow that he is no longer afraid. The introduction of human blood combined with total psychological defiance breaks the system. An explosive burst of blue light erupts from the pit, instantly shattering the shadowy form and neutralizing a 50-year-old hex. Vivan's final report detailed a system that the world dismissed as superstition. He showed that surviving a nightmare requires mastering its specific logic, even if the fields themselves remain a permanent home for shadows waiting to be fed.